Anyway, thank you so much for y'all being here tonight. We had 2 meetings for this important topic because we wanted to give those of you who don't have the opportunity to come on Fridays at noon to come hear a very important speaker. And Brandon, you can go ahead and make your way up here because I'm going to let you promo the video. So while you're coming up here, I'm going to talk about you. Most of you all have met Brandon before. Brandon Darby is a wonderful patriot. He's so dedicated to truth, and we need more people in the media like that. I don't really call Brandon a member of the media because he's so unique and he does such a good job. He really digs deep to bring you the information that you need. And I submit to you that the United States, the people of the United States, and particularly of Texas, know far more about the truth about our wide open border than we, with Brandon reporting on it, than we ever would have known. Because you see, Brandon has worked very hard to earn credibility with law enforcement, with the Border Patrol. He has earned their trust. Therefore, they give him information that they won't give to anybody else. And then Brandon tells us about it. So I want you to welcome a great patriot, a very dear friend of mine, Brandon Darby. He's going to give you an overview of what this video clip is about. And then he's going to talk to you about the important things you need to know about the status of the border now. And then we'll have some questions. So would you please turn off your cell phones and let's give Brandon a very warm Smith County welcome. Thank you.
That was very kind. Hey, thanks for having me back. You know, JoAnn, don't worry about not calling me a member of the media because the mainstream media says I'm not a member of the media too. They keep writing about our stories though. But we're not members of the media to them. You know, we have a situation right now where for about the last year and a half, I've been, maybe a little longer than that, I've been on the border quite a bit. I've spent the majority of my time that I wasn't with my child down on the border. And there are a lot of people who report on border issues, but they usually report on very local issues. And they don't have the resources to go all the way from the Gulf of Mexico and then to carry that reporting all the way to San Diego or to the Pacific Ocean. And so we were lucky that we've been able to do that. And so we've spent a lot of time, and myself personally, I spent a lot of time just really talking. You know, I'll tell you, I know we got to introduce the video, but I want to talk for a minute first. When, I think it was June 5th when we released the photos, how many of you saw the photos of the kids, of all the minors in those institutions in the Rio Grande Valley sector? And when we released those, it was really the first time that mainstream media cared about what we were reporting on the border. And it was the first time that a lot of people even thought about the border. You guys might think about it, most conservatives think about it, but you didn't really, I don't think people focused in on it until that happened. And it wasn't anything great I did, it was just that people trusted me to give me those photos to release to show America what was happening. And now there's all kinds of investigations and people are all mad at me in the management of Border Patrol and the DOJ, that's okay. I don't mind that so badly. But when we released those, everyone started to care, and then all the reporters started to call the Border Patrol and say, what's going on? Give us a tip, give us a lead. And they had a problem because we had already spent the last year and a half or more down there, right? So who are the Border Patrol, who's the agent going to give information to? Are they going to give information to the reporter who usually trashes them for the Washington Post, or are they going to give information to the guy they met in the middle of nowhere who gave them their card and talked with them, you know? They're going to give information to that person. So building those relationships has been key for us. We've had a really difficult time because we finally got people talking about the border, And it took a big chunk of my life. It's never taken me that long to get people to care about an issue before and to get people really focused on it and fired up. And it took me a long time working on that to participate in getting everyone fired up. And as soon as we got everybody fired up, and I know maybe it's tacky to be kind of critical right now, considering like our governor's indictment or whatever, but as soon as we got everyone fired up, our state leaders came out and they said, we're going to secure the border. We're sending 1,000 National Guardsmen to secure the border. We're going to take action. Well, lo and behold, that wasn't true. How many of you know that that's not true? They are sending the National Guard to the border, but they're not sending them to the border. They're sending them to 25.6% of the border, maybe 25.7. My math is not the best, but it's right around a quarter of the Texas border, just a quarter. So I'm going to give you a brief little understanding. If you don't already know, if you're looking at Texas, or do it this way, you have the Rio Grande Valley sector, then you have the Laredo sector, then you have the Del Rio sector, then you have the Big Bend sector, then you have the El Paso sector, right? The Rio Grande Valley sector is but a quarter of our border. And just Texas alone, just the Texas border with Mexico, not talking about the U.S. So when they came out, and when Governor Perry came out, I was very happy that he was acknowledging the cartel activity and the crimes around the border and the criminals coming across. I was very happy, and I felt slightly inspired by it. But then when I thought about what he was saying and what he was really doing, not that he intended it this way, but it's what the effect has been. The effect has been is it's taken some of the momentum out of the movement to secure the border, because everyone's like, well, Governor Perry's securing the border. And he's not securing the border. He's securing 25% of the border. And even then, that's not sufficient at all. What he's doing is not sufficient. And he's been in there 12 years, but that's another story. So the next sector over is the Laredo sector. So what we decided we were going to do is we were going to invite a group of grassroots leaders from Texas, which is kind of bizarre for a media outlet to do. But we decided to organize, and we decided that we were going to invite grassroots leaders from Texas to go and to see the Laredo sector and then to see the Rio Grande Valley sector. And so the video you're about to see is from that tour. It's just, we put it together pretty quickly, but it's that tour. It's all the leaders coming together to actually see it. So you're going to get to see it, and we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. Thank you.
I'm just a boy, fair and stranger, traveling through the world. Ain't no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. Said he'd meet me when I come. I'm only going over Jordan.
Just leaving San Antonio, headed for Laredo with a group of some of the top Texas grassroots leaders, Tea Party leaders here in the state of Texas. Breitbart, Texas Managing Director Brandon Darby organized this trip to bring these people down to the border and let them see for themselves, eyewitness what's really happening down here on the border. It's one thing to read about it and to watch the videos and see the news reports, but to come down and actually experience this gives you a totally different perspective. As we found coming down here to the border, Brandon's been coming down here for a year and a half now, and I've been coming down here for several months. And it's a totally different perspective when you see this for yourself. So that's what we wanted to do, is bring these grassroots leaders, these Tea Party leaders down here and let them see exactly what's really happening, not what the mainstream media is showing them, so they can go back to their organizations and help spread the word as to the truth as to what's really happening down here on the Texas border and Texas-Mexico border in South Texas. And I think it's going to be a very effective trip for them to be able to communicate and help spread the word on the reality of what's on the ground down here.
take a look at this street. This is really important. See the street?
Yeah.
Do you see there's streets everywhere, there's steps everywhere, and do you see the way that everyone here appears? All someone has to do, and most of them who do it make it across and actually successfully do so. All they have to do is get across this river that we're about to go see, and if they run and then make a mad dash to get into the center of town, no one can tell who they are. People in the town will hide them. That's what Border Patrol said to me. So it's really not that far of a stretch to get in. And that's just right here, and they'll do it right in the center, middle of the day, they'll do it. So if they can get across the river without being detected, they hide in the grass, and then they make a mad dash for it, you know? And they make it. And that is Nuevo Laredo on the other side of that river right there behind you. That is the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. Okay, now you see the river? See how shallow it is? Check it out. This is the only border fence between Texas and the Zetas headquarters, right here. This is it.
Okay, get that picture.
That's all that's here. Usually there's lookouts all along the river, so usually they're fishermen that are lookouts. You're going to see that on the U.S. side too tonight. You're going to see fishermen who are just out there in the middle of nowhere alone or somehow feel safe just sitting there fishing in the middle of nowhere in cartel lands. And then right over here in these bushes, right before that big berm that comes out, see the lighter color shade and you see the dirt? See how there's a big...
It's smooth. Someone's like, yeah, someone's in that one in there.
Right. There's always a scout over there. And I've watched them before when I've been sitting out there in the weed. I've watched them and a guy just been wearing like no shoes, shorts, and a t-shirt. They just walk out and look at walks in. Like, hey, and then they just go sit in there. And they're watching U.S. law enforcement. It's just amazing. The best time is today. If you go down the river just past that bend, it's going to loop to the left a little bit, and then it loops a hard 90 degrees up to the right. That's what the river does. And so all of the area between us, or really between those tracks and that river bend, is called West Laredo. And then that's also, you'll see tonight. So the last time we were down here, they had one Border Patrol agent stationed for all of West Laredo, even though West Laredo is the area where the narcotics come. We're in a location called One River Place, just outside, 8 miles outside of Laredo, Texas, immediately across the river from Nuevo Laredo, which is pretty much the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. This area was going to be a neighborhood, and obviously it didn't get developed. But what you're going to find is there's very little security. Through sources, we were able to determine that there are very few sensors in this region. As we walk close to the river, which is not very far this way, you're going to see every maybe half mile there's going to be a fisherman, right? And he's going to be out there fishing, and he fishes there every day, almost for a living, because it actually is for a living. They're scouts for the cartels. Maybe not all of them, but probably they are. And that's what we're doing out here. As we walk, you're going to find bits of clothing from illegal immigrants. As we walk, you're going to find inner tubes, deflated inner tubes that smugglers have used, and you're going to see that there's absolutely nothing between us right here and between the highway that's right there and between the Zetas territory. And we're in the Laredo sector, one sector away from the Rio Grande Valley sector, where Texas leaders and national leaders are focusing all of their law enforcement efforts.
Again, my name is Hector Garza. I'm a Border Patrol agent coming up on almost 14 years of working in the Laredo sector area. I'm also the spokesperson for the National Border Patrol Council, Local 2455. We represent about 1,700 members, Border Patrol agents, and support staff in the Laredo area. Unfortunately, what we see a lot is that a lot of these agents are being assigned to like administrative type of duties. We've seen a decline in apprehensions in the southwest border, including the Rio Grande Valley and the Laredo area. A lot of people think that it's because of the Beast, which is a train that brings all these people from Central America to the U.S.-Mexico border. It derailed in Mexico, and it's been out of service for like 2 weeks already. I mean, it's only been about 3 weeks that the numbers have started kind of declining. Obviously, the numbers are down with family units and children, but obviously the drugs are still coming and the dangerous criminals. Whenever there's been like escapes in prisons in Central America, and they put like a big announcement to the agents, what happens is that we end up catching them here on the U.S. border. Now, what happens to the ones we don't catch? We'll either come straight up through here, another one will come down through that area, and another one will come through that area at the same time. And actually, the smuggling activity will occur. And it's very easy to actually smoke people. Every part of the Mexican side, of the river on this Mexican side, somebody is assigned to that area. So we know that there are scouts that are always looking out for us. We have scouts on the Mexican side, and we have scouts on the American side as well. And if you don't have the sufficient manpower, you can see how it's very easy to actually have people get away. We do have a border patrol agent here, but when we have this border patrol agent here, there's going to be a group of 20, 30 crossing just downriver. And this is a very busy area, and you can kind of see how the town lends itself for this type of community. There's a lot of abandoned houses that they use as stash houses, and the law enforcement presence out here is very small. Now, what we know is that these criminal organizations will exploit the communities, and be it that they're volunteering to actually engage in these criminal activities, or be it that they're coerced by the drug cartels. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people are actually coerced and intimidated by these activities. I mean, if you live in this town and there's really little to no law enforcement presence, you pretty much are going to become a target of these criminal organizations. Morale is low, especially when you are risking your life out there, when you're exposing yourself to the elements, and you apprehend groups of people, and then the government turns around and releases them into our country. So yes, morale is low. However, our agents still continue to come to work, and they still try their best, and we are very good at what we do. The way to shut down the border is having boots on the ground. As you can see, you can have an agent here with a very nice truck and a camera system, but if you don't have the boots on the ground to be able to respond, how do you stop it?
Immediately behind us is Nuevo Laredo, which is the headquarters for the Los Zetas cartel. And now this area here is between the river, which is the boundary between the U.S. and Mexico, and a neighborhood called the Azteca neighborhood. The Azteca neighborhood is a low-income neighborhood, and is known for smuggling. It's a major narcotics hub for this part of Texas. And so people come up, you can see from the footprints, people come up the river, it's very shallow here, and they're able to come up and wait, and then scouts tell them when the border patrol is gone, and then the people make a run for it to the neighborhood, and once they're in the neighborhood, they're kept in a series of stash houses, and law enforcement doesn't know what to do. Now, we've spoken with border patrol agents out here, in addition to speaking to the border patrol agents union, and they've told us all about it. So basically, this is an area that's controlled by the city, like a city park, right? It's called Fisherman's Landing. And as you go down that way, go west, the park is just getting more and more overgrown. And there's a series of drainage tunnels. And in the drainage tunnels, people go and they use that for narco trafficking and for smuggling. Law enforcement isn't allowed to catch them and go in there. So if law enforcement sees someone, if the Border Patrol sees someone shipping drugs or people, and the Border Patrol approaches them, the people simply go in the drainage tunnels, and Border Patrol isn't allowed to go in there. Only the fire department can go in there. That's the way the rules are set up. So basically, the entire area in Laredo, most of the area, is just one big place for criminals to come in or for illegal aliens to come in and to get away with it. We're just one section over from the Rio Grande Valley sector. So the way it works is you have the Gulf of Mexico, then the Rio Grande Valley sector, which is in the news a lot right now. And then right over from that, you have the Laredo sector. But interestingly, none of the National Guard are being sent here. There's no state troopers being sent here. So it's really just the Border Patrol agents out here in insufficient numbers trying to deal with this. But the place, as you can see, is wide open.
The outside Dulles Bridge used to be, this was a big area for narcotics. Now it's kind of expanded to the people. It's slowed down a little bit. Even though we don't see anybody, we still have somebody monitoring us. What do we need? Better equipment. I drive a boat at night, and we have the headgear, which you wear, sometimes helmet, sometimes the headgear, which is elastic, and mine's rotted out. So instead of driving like this, I have to drive like this, which means one hand on the NVG. Because we can drive with NVGs and radar, but it makes it easier if we have the headgear, if we have those helmets. I love DPS, I love the state of Texas. Their gear is better than ours. Their rifles are better, their armor is better, their headgear is better, their boats are better. don't know that we need 6 machine guns. One would be nice, but we'll probably never get it. Yeah, their equipment is better than ours. We have lookouts everywhere. If you look at Unsaldo's Park on the weekends, if you happen to go out, or if you were around tomorrow, you'll see families who look like they're fishing, but they're on the cell phone 90% of the time. So they're calling out, hey, the boats have moved. All you have to do is move 100 yards in either direction, and you can't be seen, and there you go. The thing is, you look for the jet skis doing a stupid move and look downriver because they're distracting you. So yeah, we have problems. A lot of times they have more intel sources than we do. You know, they'll take a load out, and they may have up to 15 or 20 scouts laid all out reporting on every single thing we do. The big stuff is this. Mexicans cross over, we process them, we can send them back if they're not going to jail. If it's an OTM is other than Mexican. I can see somebody cross the river right now, I pick them up, I process them, Mexico won't take them back because they're not Mexican citizens. Even though I could take a video of them crossing from Mexico to here, show it to them, and they still wouldn't take them back. If they're coming here, if you move 50 yards upriver, and by the time you get there, they're already here. The smugglers have made a cash windfall, right? Why? It's like the Cubans. All they have to do is touch the land, and as soon as they touch the land, welcome to America. At that point, we're responsible for safety, security, and all this. The Border Patrol the best job out of all this because we catch the people. You know, our resources, we've been hampered. We have so many people babysitting or watching. When our cells were packed, we'd have, our station can hold like 300 people. We've actually held up to 1,300 almost. OTMs are probably, it depends. If they're adult OTMs without children, they're probably going to be sent back unless they can really show that they have what's called a credible fear, which an asylum officer determines. If they're families, meaning an adult, usually a female and multiple children, they're probably going to get to stay. They dumped a bunch of them off at the bus station today.
What do y'all think?
Wow.
Thank you. Does any of that surprise any of you out here? Now let me ask you something. If you spent the last year and a half of your life doing this, right, working out there, how would you feel knowing that and watching Governor Perry's press conference? I'm not trying to trash Perry at all, but how do you think that felt for them to talk about securing the border when they're only talking about a quarter of it and not even mention the Laredo sector? They didn't feel very good. Now here's the real kicker, right? I'm a tough guy. People say bad things about me all the time. But how do you think the Border Patrol agents felt? You know, imagine, I mean, look at the conundrum we're in right now. How many of y'all like unions? I don't like unions. I don't like them at all. But now here's the catch. The Border Patrol agents are in a situation where the administration doesn't like them. We know that. The media doesn't like them. You know, most of us never even think about them because they're not in our life, right? They're down there. And they're federal agents, so they can't speak out about what's going on. They routinely, the numbers they turn in and the information what they see with their eyes and the information they give, by the time it gets sent out to the media from Washington, it's not the same information. That's just completely being lied to us. So now they're in that situation, they're constantly attacked, and the only people who can speak out on behalf of what's going on is the Border Patrol Union. Do you see the conundrum? Do you see the little catch there? So I've decided that I like the Border Patrol Union a lot. And I've used that as a mechanism to support the men and women of Border Patrol. Some people have objected to that and said, they're a union. And I'm like, yeah, but look what they do. You know, and by the way, they're all very conservative. I don't know if you can imagine that most Border Patrol agents aren't raging liberals. You know, they're not open border liberals for sure. So we have a really bad situation. We have a situation occurring in our country which is we're growing accustomed to. We're used to, I mean, all of us expect, most of us, maybe some of you out there don't, but I do. I expect that there are CIA secrets that I don't get to know right now. How many of you agree with that? I expect that. I don't expect the Department of Defense to tell me everything they're gonna do tomorrow at all. You know, I get that. National security, I get that. What I don't get is why we have a government who lies to us about numbers on the border, who tells us it's not a national security issue, but then at the same time, they criminalize any information from the border being sent out. That's what they do. And if it weren't for the people in the Border Patrol who leak information to me, well, most of us wouldn't know. I mean, we wouldn't have known how many people were in those border facilities. We wouldn't have seen the images. We wouldn't have known the numbers from 75 countries that are coming across the southwest border, the individuals. We released all of the numbers. I'm sure they did not appreciate that, you know. But if it weren't for those guys, we wouldn't have it. And so we're in this situation, too, on the right, where a lot of people just don't like federal agents, and I can understand that, because we generally want state law enforcement to handle matters. But then state law enforcement can't handle matters in this situation. There's some debate about that, and we're trying to fight for them to do it. JoAnn's leading that, I would say. But we have a really bad situation. We also have a situation where in the state of Texas, and I'm going to tell you what, I'm not a hateful person. I'm not a cold person. I understand why people want to come to this country. I think we have the best thing in the world. I get it 100%. My heart breaks for them. It really does. And if any of you really know any details about my life, you understand that my heart breaks for them. But at the same time, we have a situation where we have a system of entitlements, right? And we can't just allow everyone in the world to come. And if we're going to have everyone in the world come, we have a problem, because now, like in our school systems in the state of Texas, what are we going to do? How many unaccompanied minors are here right now for Texas schools? How many are starting Texas public schools this month? How many of you know that answer? I don't know either. Nobody knows. The districts don't know. No one knows. The federal government knows, but we don't know. Why can't we know that? You can't ask. Nobody can tell. So we're in a pickle, people, and the best thing I can think of to tell you is that we have to reach out to Border Patrol agents and support them. JoAnn, what were your thoughts going down to the border? Like, what? Come up here, please. Sorry, I know it's awkward. You're not expecting to talk, and I'm pulling you up.
No, I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah. There's another mic? That's perfect. Well, I don't want to give her another mic, because then I can't control how much she talks.
Okay, well, and before I get into that, I want to recognize State Representative Matt Schaefer, sitting right here. Matt's on this, and also the district director for Congressman Louis Gohmert. Jonna Fitzgerald is sitting right here in the corner. Okay, well, I can tell you that it took me, Brandon, and you know I'm pretty tough, it took me about a week to sort out my feelings about what I saw, because it was a combination of being so angry at our government for lying to us, and that's from the federal government and the state government, lying to us about how porous, how wide open the border is. And angry because I think that the Border Patrol and to a certain degree state law enforcement are used as political props. And I resent that, because I have friends in DPS. In fact, a really good close friend that was deployed again today down there, and I am afraid for him because of what I saw. I resent law enforcement being used as political props and not being supported. As you saw there, those two agents were talking about how they don't have the kind of equipment they need to do their jobs. So past the rage was an overwhelming sense of sadness. It was like grief. I mean, it was like grieving over losing a loved one, because one of the things that Agent Spratt said as we were standing and just talking to him, he said, we are witnessing the death of the Republic. And I can't tell you how that just hit me in my heart, because Instinctively and intuitively, I know that. That's why we're working so hard to keep pushing on state officials to do something. And so it was eye-opening, Brandon, because, you know, I follow everything that Breitbart Texas does. I appreciate so much what Brandon and his reporters do. I followed it. But, you know, when you told me, when I called you and I said, Brandon, is this something that we really need to do? And he goes, JoAnn, we really have to do this. I said, okay, if we really have to do it, we'll do it. But I can tell you, there's nothing like seeing it for yourself. In the dark part where they were showing the trail, I swear to you, those trails at night are places that mountain goats shouldn't be. And there was a couple of times I was going, okay, well, if I get killed here, my parents will never forgive me. But anyway, it was an eye-opening experience.
Okay, so thank you. So here's the situation. Don't go too far, though. I want you up here. Here's what we have, guys. We have a wide open border. It is not most of the pundits I hear on Fox, all the way from MSNBC to Fox, talking about it, the pundits I hear in the state, I'm really frustrated they don't know what they're talking about because they haven't seen it, right? They haven't seen, every 40 miles of the border roughly is different. Really, the people are different, the communities are different, the terrain is different, There's different needs for each area. And when you secure one area to make it look good, like if you go to the El Paso sector, man, if you're in El Paso, it looks so good. There's the wall, and there's another fence, and there's all this stuff. There's holes in it. I found holes in it, and I reported on it, and I'll keep reporting on it. But it looks so good. But then when you immediately walk outside of the city of El Paso, I'm not joking you, there's an area where the state of Texas meets New Mexico and meets Mexico, right? That little intersection there, and that little T. And all there are these posts in the ground, driven into the ground to mark where the border is. There's nothing there. So the last time I was there, and I wish I had published it, but I didn't. Long story, been busy, but I'll publish it probably this weekend or next weekend, Monday. But I did this interview with this guy, and he was in Mexico, and I was in the U.S., and I was sitting like this is him, and I was like this far away from him talking. Now, he's been deported 7 times, and he was here since he was 9, and then he got deported because he went to jail and got deported. And then he came back, and he went to jail again and got deported, but went to jail for crimes, for actual violent crimes, for assault and for other things. And he was like, I'm coming back, though. I'm like, when? He goes, well, I have to train for it because it takes a little bit of effort, but I'm going to come back through Laredo. And this guy's in El Paso, and he's coming back. And that's just countless stories like that, but there's nothing there. So there's all this money being spent to secure the city area, and then the second that you go just like not even a mile away, there's nothing there anymore. It's wide open. New Mexico is a little bit different. Like when you go through through New Mexico, that's still the El Paso sector all the way to Arizona. It's a little bit different because of the terrain. But it's a little bit different. It's not as high trafficy. But then when you get back out of the El Paso sector to the Tucson sector, right, which is in Arizona, the terrain is so rough. Like I visited where Brian Terry was killed 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. How many of you think that was easy? It wasn't easy to get there, And then when you're there, it's frightening because there's no law enforcement, and then there are illegal aliens coming, there's drug smuggling coming, they have packs, but those aren't the biggest risk. The biggest risk are the groups who are half aliens and then half U.S. citizens, like criminals, prison gangs, who send out rip crews. And they have these guys, like 5 or 6 guys who will be out there armed to the teeth, and they're just waiting for a drug shipment to come through, and they rob the drug shipment. They rob the drug cartels, right? Those are some rough boys, But that's happening on our soil. It's happening within 10 miles of the border. That stuff is happening. That's frightening to me. When you go out there, I didn't go out. I usually go alone. I wouldn't go out there alone, so I was able to finally hit the couple of areas I would never do alone. And I had 2 guys with me with ARs, Like I wasn't playing. Because I know what it is. I know what it is. When you go a little bit, there's a little bit outside of that area, a little further west in Arizona, there's an area called the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge, right? It's wide open, wide open. I'm talking when you walk up to the border and you're out in the middle of nowhere, right? You walk up to the border and there's just like this metal I-beam welded across the pathways and the roads. There's nothing out there. Nobody. Anyone can cross. Consequently, anyone can come and take you and bring you right back across because there's no law enforcement to help you. That's how wide open our country is. And people, when we talk about like, well, the border's wide open. No, I'm telling you, like it literally is wide open. Not everywhere, because then when you get to the Yuma sector, right? The Yuma sector, which is the end of Arizona and then I think a little bit of California, man, they have it locked down like Israel has their border locked down. It's locked down. It's perfect. It's like they have the original wall, and then they have this gigantic metal fence, and it's separated. It's about as wide as maybe from me to the projector right there. The sand area that they drag looking for footprints. They have cameras. They have the sensors. They have another fence beyond that fence. They have all the agents stationed properly. So they can do that anywhere. They did it there. California's border is pretty secure too. There's a couple of areas that aren't. I don't know why. But San Diego's looks pretty good. When you go and check out the security they have there. But then there's an area in California, it's still the San Diego sector. How many of you ever heard the name Robert Rosas Jr.? He's a Border Patrol agent who was slain. You should know that. There haven't been that many of them, but you guys should really read about these people. This guy was killed. He was working out there. Let me tell you, they go out there alone, right? How many of you would go out there alone? I go out there alone because I'm crazy. But you shouldn't go out there alone. They send these guys out there alone. Their radios often don't work because the federal government, after 9/11, all of the federal agencies' radios worked from the towers. Well, then one agency upgraded their towers, and they never upgraded the Border Patrol's towers. The Border Patrol's radios are their communication system. So they can't call for backup. So in 2010, I believe it was, or maybe late 2009, a sensor went off on the border. And it's just a little metal fence. It's about this high. You can jump in like this and see over it. That's all that's there. And a sensor went off. And so Robert Rosas Jr., a father, a husband, a son, he goes out there to check on the sensor and see if a group of aliens set it off. And someone attacks him. He ends up firing his gun 2 times at the guy, hits the guy, and then all these other guys come out. There were 5 illegal aliens who attacked Robert Rosas Jr. And now, if you were getting in a bar fight or something, and some of you can relate to that, that's why I said bar fight, because I know you can, even though you act like you don't. Some of you have been to bars before. If you got in a bar fight and some guy stabbed your friend, wouldn't you at that point put your hand, be like, whoa? Imagine what kind of people these were after one of them gets shot twice to still keep attacking him. And they killed him. They killed him dead on this ridge. I visited the ridge. They killed him dead because they wanted to take his night vision equipment. That's why they killed him dead. Left him there. When I went out there, I was about to cry. The guy named Sean Moran, he's the vice president of the National Border Patrol Council. He took me out there. And how many of you have video cameras? Everybody has a video camera, most people? Not that many people. Somebody, raise your hand if you have video camera. Okay, that's good. So you have a viewfinder, right? So you're looking through the viewfinder. And I was out there, it was really windy, and I'm looking through this viewfinder, and they take me to the memorial, so the first time I'm seeing it is through my camera, right? And there's this gigantic cross that's about 15 feet high, 12 feet high, and when you go up to the cross, there was this piece of paper, and it was blowing in the wind. It was a laminated piece of paper. It was such high wind, right? I almost ripped off. And I was looking through my camera, and then when I opened it up with my hand, it's a picture of him holding his little baby, and it says, "Miss you, Papa." You know? You know what I mean? And now, years later, guess what? Do you think they fixed the fence there? No, they didn't fix the fence there. They didn't do anything there. Nothing, you know? And then guess what else I found out? The guy who killed him was an illegal alien on supervised release. He was a coyote, the scum of scum, a human smuggler, right? The scum, and I know I'm supposed to say I love you and God bless you, I'll pray for you, but this guy's scum, right? In human terms, maybe in godly terms, we're all scum and we all fall. I get that. In human terms, this guy's scum, right? A human smuggler, somebody who, they take girls from Mexico and from Central America and they bring them in, they rape them, they do horrible things as they're bringing these people in. This guy gets caught in California in the U.S. Attorney's Office under Eric Holder, right? Not, you know what I mean, the DOJ under Eric Holder. They let this guy out on supervised release, even though they knew and could prove he was the scum of scum, right? So what does he do? He flees back to Mexico, and within a couple of months, what does he do? He kills Robert Rosas Jr. He leads the group to kill that Border Patrol agent. So to be a Border Patrol agent alive today had it not been for that, you know? It's horrible. This is the reality that's going on. So all I can do is tell you. And all I can do is tell people all over the country. I just keep traveling, trying to write and manage the website while I just travel. You know, I think in the last 43 days, the last week I spent most of it home. For 43 days prior, I was home 3 nights, you know? I have this big box full of little shampoos and conditioners. You think I'm joking? I have this gigantic box, you know, full of little bars of soap. Because I'm just traveling telling people. So what you can do is the first thing you can do is you can call people out when they say, well, Texas is securing the border. Texas is not securing the border. Texas is trying to secure a little section of the border. I was at a thing in Northeast Tarrant County at Julie McCarty's event. And God bless him, I'm not trying to be mean. He may be the nicest man in the world. What was that congressman's name? What was his name? Burgess. I go to this event. These 2 Border Patrol agents worked till 9 a.m. in Laredo, right? Then they traveled all the way to Dallas to talk and tell people about what the men and women of Border Patrol are going through. That took a lot of work. They have to do it on their day off. They can't do it as a work day. They have to do it on the one day off they have with family, right? And they travel up there. And this congressman shows up and he insists on talking before we talk. And he goes up there and this is what he said. He was like, God bless Rick Perry. He secured the border. He has the cartels on the run. It's all going to be okay now. And I was very offended. I'm like, dude, you just showed up to this thing that I didn't. I drove for 13 hours from Arizona's border to get there. And these Border Patrol agents, I was like, you can't just show up. And so I got up on the stage. Finally, I got the mic and I said, Congressman, sir, where are you? And he left. And I was like, he left? You got to be kidding me. And so I got kind of mad about it. And I said some things. Nothing ugly, not too ugly. Nothing, no name calling. But that's what I'm talking about. You got to call people out. If there's any doubt in your mind, you know, like I'll just tell you a little mathematics here. All I need to do for my website is to post about 8 pieces a day, 8 articles, right? We generally post about 20-something. Not always, but mostly we do. And that's because we have so much we want you to see, you know? And if you don't like to get on the internet, then have someone else print it out or something. Read what we're telling you, you know? Read what we're telling you. We're telling you the minutia, we're proving it, we're telling you what's going on. Call people out when they lie to you. And do I think that Perry, am I saying he's a big liar? I'm saying he omitted a whole lot of reality, and it didn't do any favors for the Border Patrol men and women, and it didn't do any favors for us as Texans. That's what I'm telling you. So with that, I think I've made it very clear to you that you have to support Border Patrol agents, that you have to call people out, and when they're not telling you the truth, I didn't mention this, but it's very important. Leave comments on articles when people say things that are false, because that's how false narratives happen, is they slowly shift the narrative, you know, until it's all of a sudden it's 100% false, and you wonder how it happened. It's because they slowly twist it. When they say there's this crisis of children, there is a crisis of children. That is 100% true. It's also very deceptive because 42%, that's another leaked document we realized, 42% of those children are actually males who claim to be 15 to 17. We don't know that they're 15 to 17. They say they're 15 to 17. And then in addition to the over 60,000 unaccompanied minors, we have tens of thousands of family units, right? We also have intelligence, and we know what? We know that a lot of the people who are coming with kids, not all of the people, but a lot of the people, they're actually renting the children. It's a ploy because once the child is here, the parents can come here, and once A parent is here, the child can come. So what is the most logical thing you would do? You would take your nephew and come, or you would take somebody else's kid and come, and then the parents are able to come, and then, you see how this works? You see where we're going? So this is what we know. We know that we're being lied to, and we need to call them out. And with that, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Do I have time for that, JoAnn?
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to open it up for Q&A.
If y'all will write it down on your cards, we'll come around and pick it up and ask Darby or Brandon, so everybody's question can get asked.
Patty, I think tonight we've got the right size crowd. If they just want to take the mic and ask
Okay,
a question.
if you'll hold your hand up, I'll bring the mic to you.
Am I?
You want to turn that one down, Jack?
Yeah, we might want to turn that mic down.
All right, we need a little bit of sound.
No, we need to use it.
That's perfect.
If you'll raise your hand, I'll come.
Okay, I'm going to answer long answers. I cannot help myself. I'm so sorry.
If Perry were to deploy 4,000 agents, would that solve the problem?
No, sir. It would not solve the problem. People often say the Border Patrol is one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the world. In the Western Hemisphere, they have 21,000, between 21 and 22,000 people in that agency. They should be able to, secure the border. Jorge Ramos always says that on Univision. The president made a big joke about it in El Paso. Remember that? He said, what do they want? They want a moat? They want an alligator in the moat? Remember that? So the simple fact of the matter is 21 to 22,000 people. It's a lot of people. The problem is 1,993 miles is a lot of miles, So no, that would not secure the border if he did 4,000. It would help, but here's the problem we have, right? Is we don't have enough Border Patrol agents. So check this out. And here's the real math on this. I'm glad you asked this. Much of our border has sensors and has cameras, right? Okay. The problem is that when the sensors go off, there's not enough Border Patrol agents on duty to go and chase those groups of people. So they chase 1 in 10 sensor activations. So now if you add 4,000 new human cameras to the border and they're not allowed to arrest people or stop people for immigration violations, what have you done? Not a dang thing. No one talks about that, but it's the truth. They already have eyes and they can't respond to the activations and to the illegal entries they know are happening. So you can put 4,000 or you can put 100,000 people down there with binoculars and a radio, which won't work. But you can put 100,000 people down there, and unless they can stop people, unless they have the ability to stop people, if they have the ability to defend themselves, they're not going to be able to do any bit of good whatsoever. Not at all. They might be able to inform us. Like one of the things the state could do is to put observers there and to inform us of what's really occurring. Because at some point, the DOJ and the CBP are going to catch up with me, and they're going to find out who my sources are. I mean, we can't keep it secret forever, and then all of the inside information we have coming out is going to be gone, and then all we're going to be left with is the official line, which is a bunch of, to put it nicely, since I'm in a church, a bunch of baloney, Next question.
According to the book of Nehemiah, in 52 days, people built the area by their property, and people political groups and religious groups and habitat and church construction missions and city projects. Okay, they're bulldozing a lot of earth, putting it straight up. They're tripod things that the military uses. You can build something that inhibits where traffic is passing. And my question is, what proportion of the property along the border belongs to private citizens and what proportion to public areas? And we may have to do it ourselves. Noah did. Professionals built the Titanic and Noah built the ark.
Okay, good question. So in Texas, because of the way the West was won, right? In Texas, most of the land on the border with Mexico is private property. In New Mexico, Arizona, and California, much of the land on the border is not private property. So it's very tricky. In Texas, if you're in the area between, roughly between Brownsville and McAllen, you would have a really hard time because not all of the property owners down there want the border secure, A lot of them want it to go back to what it was before 2000, before 9/11 in 2001. And that's what I generally hear in that region. There's some people who do, but what I generally hear along the border from people in that region is they'll say, that's our community too. We used to go back and forth, and yeah, there was some corruption, but it wasn't so violent, and we just like it to go back to that. Well, that's obviously unacceptable in a nation of laws. I mean, that's why we're not Mexico, is because we're a nation of law. We believe in law and order, and they're not a nation of laws, and that's what you get when you have not a nation of laws, is you have a lawless, corrupt, failed state, which is what we have, for the most part, I think, with Mexico. So a lot of it, when you start getting out closer to Laredo, a lot of the private property owners are really funny about security. They're scared to death about doing anything about it. They'll get in trouble if they protect their own land. When you get out in Arizona, it's all federal property for the most part. The ranchers just inside of that federal land on the border, most of them are pretty irritated about what's going on. But what are they going to do? Even the ranchers tell me, they said, it's 1 to 5, 1 to 10, depends. When we call, we see a big group of aliens or smugglers, that the Border Patrol is able to show up. It's not the Border Patrol agents' fault. There's just not enough of them there. They're not assigned properly either. We haven't broken this yet, but we're going to probably break it tomorrow around noon. How many of you are in media in here? Anybody? If you are, please don't go and tell my story, please, before I tell it. But I'll just tell you anyways. So they've removed all of the support staff for the Border Patrol, the dispatchers, the phone people. And now they're taking Border Patrol agents off of the line to go and answer phones and be support staff. What do you do with that? What do you do? What do you do with that? What do you do with that? So all you can do with that is fire people up and tell people what's going on and hope they care, and that's all you can do. But as far as building a wall, the political will, when there's the political will, California, there's so many sanctuary cities in California, and out of the few conservative cities, like Marietta, they just got a bunch of people dumped on them. How many of y'all know about Marietta, California? We broke that. We broke that. We leaked something, and we said, hey, the federal government's going to start shipping in mass 500 per week and releasing them, illegal aliens into Marietta, California. And then the Customs and Border Protection Office got on Twitter and called me a liar publicly. And then 3 days later, they were like, okay, so we will be releasing. So then I was telling the truth, they just lied. They just straight up called me a liar. How do you think that feels when you're a writer and the federal government publicly calls you a liar and you're telling the truth, It's kind of intimidating, which is why they do it, which is frightening. That's not what we should be having in the United States. What's that? 100% enemies. Let's be honest here, people. I'm not gonna go Alex Jones on you here, but I'm gonna not to insult Alex Jones if someone out there is I'm just being honest, But I'm gonna tell you something. Look at all the momentum the Democrats had with Wendy Davis, And then look at the whole Battleground Texas thing. How many of you think that did them much good? But now, if you can get, say, a few 100,000, 500,000 illegal aliens into the United States, right? Illegally, you can just completely disregard the law, right? We're all going to be mad about it, which we should be. And not because we dehumanize them, but because we're a nation of law, Because we work and they take our tax dollars and they give it to people that we're not, it's like, I'd rather give that to, I have a sister who doesn't do that well. I'd rather give her my money, Like, you help your sister, I'll help mine, and I'll help yours if I can, kind of deal. And so what's going to happen is the Battleground Texas people, all of those networks they built, there's going to be the networks they mobilize to help the illegal aliens integrate into U.S. society, right? Think about it. So then what do you have? You have several 100,000 Democrats coming in per year into our state.
Yes.
Now we talk about turning Texas blue. So when you say, like, is there the political will? I'm not going to say anybody's allowing it to happen for that reason. That would be Alex Jones, because I don't have the facts to prove it. But I didn't fall off a truck or something and hit my head. And I have reason and common sense, right? And you know, my grandpa used to say that same thing that all you say, which is, everyone says, you know, like, things aren't always what they seem. But he always told me, he said, Brandon, people always forget the second part of that. I'm like, what's that, Grandpa? He's like, well, but usually they are, you know? So, I don't know, like, why would the Democrats secure the border? It's the only way they're ever going to win our state over. It's the only way they're going to win. Why would they do it? Right, but that's the thing, is you have to have political will to do it, and it just doesn't exist. We're trying to build the political will, but it doesn't exist. I mean, how many of you thought about the border yesterday? Well, thank you. A lot of people did, and a lot of them were thinking about the journalist who got his head cut off, which is horrible, by ISIS. How many of you thought about it last week? Most people didn't. They were thinking about whatever media was talking about that day. You know, they were angered at the militarization of police, even though the cops in outside of St. Louis were having their ankles broken by bricks and having Molotov cocktails thrown at them, you know? But everybody was angry. They think about and they do whatever media tells them to think about and do. And I only have so many tricks up my sleeve to make media talk about the border. I have a couple more, but I'm running out of them, you know? So it's a problem. We don't have the political will. The border can be secured. You could probably reduce about 90%, 95% of the traffic and the narcotics on the border if you just had the political will. You know, people say, well, a wall wouldn't work in the Rio Grande River. I'm like, yeah, it would. Gomer, and no media's here, so I'm going to tell a story. He's the only one that I saw go down there that didn't go down there, and this is what always makes me so mad. People go down there and like, I'm going to the border, and I'm going to be talking to the Border Patrol. You're not talking to the Border Patrol. You're talking to their politically appointed leaders who are serving Barack Obama. That's who you're talking to when you do that. If you want to go and see the border, you don't tell anybody you're going. You go and look, and the men and women of the Border Patrol will tell you what's going on down there. And then whenever their leadership finds out you're there, then you're going to see this massive display of border security that does not exist when they're not there. When I was in Laredo sector, I was there one week. I was there on a Friday night, nothing, no security, completely wide open, most of the sector. The next week and a half later, it was the next Friday, I came and Jorge Ramos from Univision was coming. They had horse patrols, they had boats, they had ATVs, they had this, like, it looked like the North Korean border or something, right? The DMZ on the 38th parallel, man. And because media was there, because they knew media was there and they knew leaders were there. That's why they do it. And that's the kind of government we have. That's the kind of federal government we have right now, where they would do that. They would do Potemkin villages. Next.
First of all, I want to thank you for what you do, and I know all the people who do.
Thank you.
We honor you and we'll hold you up in our prayers. You need it, but we're going to ask God to always give you a source. God has a plan. But next, I'd like to find out, where do you post your information, on what website?
Breitbart, Texas. Breitbart, Texas is what I control. Breitbart News, sometimes I'll put, if you go to Breitbart News, I'm going to give you guys some cards in a minute, but if you go to Breitbart News, one of the tabs is Breitbart, Texas, or you can just go to breitbarttexas.com. That's my site. I don't control what goes on the other parts of the site, even though I do have some influence, you could say. But it's not my editorial. What I can tell you is I think that the overall company does a great job, but I think in particular Breitbart Texas covers the border more than anyone else, really. I would say there's a couple of sites that only cover the border, but most of them tend to be left of center a little bit, or they only cover the narcotics aspect of it. And I think that our standards for Well, I'll just tell you, I think that our standards for not releasing things unless they're factual, we're not perfect, but I think they're pretty high, you know? So go to Breitbart, Texas. You can also follow me on Twitter. How many of you even know? Yeah, y'all know what Twitter is. Some of y'all probably call it the Twitters. My grandmother calls it the Twitter. She's like, are you on the Twitters again? And I'm like, don't say the Twitters. It sounds like something you get in Mexico from drinking water or something. You know, it's like, man, I went to Cancun and I got the Twitters, you know. Like, it sounds horrible. So just Twitter. It's Twitter. There's no S on the end. It's not plural. It's singular. But I'm on Twitter at Brandon Darby, if you're on there. And I'm pretty vocal on my Twitter account. But Breitbart, Texas is where I put all the stuff that I'm writing, for the most part. Anybody else? How many of you are afraid to ask me a question because you think I'm going to talk for 20 minutes? Sorry, I told you.
Okay. It sounds like there's not a way to get enough people to man the border. Do you know, first of all, do you know how many miles, because I don't, how many miles the whole Texas border is? Is there a solution? Has anybody ever come up with anything, and who can do something about it?
Thank you. There's actually a bunch of solutions that could happen. Most of the solutions I've seen are kind of one size fits all. I think most of our political leaders, I never finished the story about Gomer, I just realized that. Most of our political leaders, they say things like, we're sending 1,000 troops to secure the border and we got the cartels on the run. It's like, no, you don't. You know, they don't. But they say things like that because it's expedient politically. You know, Abbott put out a 400-page plan, which is very in-depth and involved. I don't think it's sufficient, but I think it's helpful, you know. Other folks have come up with issues that are very helpful because, with bills that are very helpful because they would reduce the incentives, or at least they're aimed at reducing the incentives, you know, to come here. And as far as the mileage in Texas, let me try to do the math in my head here. I believe that we have, out of 1,993 miles of U.S.-Mexico border, Texas, I want to say, it seems a little off to me, but I want to say that we have somewhere between 1,100 and 1,300, so that math, it's about right. Somewhere, yeah, 1,254. Now keep in mind that that's 1,254 miles of this, you know? Like that's true miles, so it's a little less than that if you just do the straight line across with a ruler and try to protract it or whatever. But we have a huge border, you know? And the only sector of the border that I haven't personally walked or seen now is the Big Bend sector. I haven't seen all of the Big Bend sector. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get people fired up about the Laredo sector, and when I'm done, then I'm gonna move over to the Del Rio sector, and I'm gonna get people fired up about that. And when I'm done, then I'm gonna move over to the Big Bend sector. And when I'm done, then I'm gonna go to the El Paso sector. And when I'm done, you're getting the point, right? There are 9 Border Patrol sectors across the southwest border. We have 5 of them, just to show you a bit of the distance that we have. Who else? Yes, sir, in the back.
No, right here.
Oh, yes, sir. There.
I'm making my way around, I promise.
I want to thank you, Brandon, also for coming. What on earth was the governor and/or his advisors thinking when he decided to put 1,000 National Guardsmen on the border with no authority, no power, no ability to arrest or to hold anybody? What was the thinking?
Well, okay, since we're here and we're being honest, am I being recorded in any way?
Yeah, it's being recorded, but
Okay.
it's not anything I haven't said, so go.
Okay, I'll just be honest. I think the biggest thing he was thinking was, I want to be president. That's what I think. That's what I think. No, hey, you know, that's one of the things, and JoAnn and I have differed. I don't agree with Dewhurst a lot politically, but as a person, I really like him. You know, he did some things for I mean, we could talk about Falfurrias, that's a whole nother story, like the secondary border counties that don't get any aid because they're not on the border. That's all. I literally talk for 24 hours about this, probably. I could do what Wendy Davis did, talking about the border. I really could, but I'm not wearing pink shoes. You know, I like some of them personally. David Dewhurst just gave some money to the volunteer sheriffs. I think that's awesome. I appreciate that, you know. Bob Price, one of my writers, talked to him about it, and he donated it, and I thought that was amazing. He did some action with the state to do it. So even if we disagree with some people, like, we have to acknowledge the good they do, and even if we agree with some people, we need to be honest, you know, we need to acknowledge the bad they do. You know, I don't really like criticizing everybody in the world. I'm not the biggest one to be mean to people. But the problem is that, or the good thing is, but it's also a problem, is that there are a lot of people like you who depend on me to tell you what's really happening down there, you know? So whether I like somebody as a person or not, I need to be honest with you, right? Because you're trusting me. You're coming here and spending your night hearing me and what I've seen. And that trust is very sacred and important. So what I'll tell you is, I think that it was a political move for the most part. And I think it was an insufficient move. I'd like to think that they see that as a step in the right direction. You know, in his credit, he has consistently kept talking about the border. You know, he didn't just say it and then go away. But like I said, I was very bothered on my behalf, on my company's behalf, and then on the behalf of the men and women in Border Patrol, and on behalf of you people, you know, and just Texans and U.S. citizens in general, when he missed the opportunity to talk about that it was just a small section of the border. He presented what he was doing as securing the border, and that's not what it is. That's not honest, you know. It's possible he didn't know, but I don't think so. It's just not honest, and I'm sorry to say that. Hey, Alan.
Good to see you. We talked about slavery in past months. We've been overwhelmed with so much other news. What do you suppose is happening with the slavery issue?
With the slavery, you said?
Pardon?
You said slavery?
Yes, the human trafficking.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Continues once it gets past the border. I'm wondering if Dallas is a major player in this these days.
All of our cities are major players, you know, and you know, Tyler, and I'm going to say I think thanks a lot to JoAnn, and thanks a lot to everybody who's been helpful. Tyler's actually started to address the issue, but like Lubbock, for instance, where I live now, because my little girl lives in Lubbock, and she's hellaciously cute. She's amazing. So I moved to Lubbock to be near her. She's 6. But Lubbock, they had a chance to get funds to help with prostitution and human trafficking, and Lubbock officially declined it and said they don't have prostitution there, which is exactly where Tyler was before JoAnn started putting some elbow grease on the politicians. And so here's what we know. In 2012, I mean, there's a lot of things I know from experience, but I'm gonna talk to you just on data, on authoritative data. In 2012, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime put out a report. It was actually put out in 2013, but it was about 2012. And UN Office on Drugs and Crime on Central America and the Caribbean. And what they identified in a big, long 60 to 80 page report that was very dense in small letters. I'm talking like 60 or 80 pages of letters that was hard for me to read at 37, right? Or 36 at the time. What they said was a few things that were really interesting. They said that people from the Horn of Africa and Yemen, the Middle East, were getting to Central America, and they were exploiting the same pathways that people from Mexico and Central America take to get into the U.S. That's significant. And the second thing they said is that the transnational criminal gangs existed, the networks existed long before the U.S. drug war, and that they will exist long after the U.S. drug war. And it said that in order to replace their decreased cocaine and marijuana profits, they have turned towards sex trafficking of young girls to replace the profits, and to sex trafficking of minors, and to smuggling of minors to replace the profits. That's very significant if you look at what was said by the UN about 2012 and how it affects us today. Like, especially when you get into decriminalization of marijuana in certain states and the decreased profits to Mexican drug trafficking organizations, and then all of a sudden we have an outburst of minors coming, right? very significant. So yeah, like human smuggling, sex trafficking is increasing. The Mexican cartels, people talk about the cartels. I think most people who talk about them don't, even on TV, they don't really know what they're talking about. Like the Sinaloa cartel in western Mexico, they probably resemble a lot more of what you would think of an Italian mob, where they think ahead, they think long term. When we talked about today, some politicians came out and talked about ISIS, and we covered that today pretty significantly on Breitbart, Texas. But they talked about that, and in one hand they're right, in one hand they're wrong. So in western Mexico, the Sinaloa cartel, which is the granddaddy of all the cartels, they're not going to let any terrorists come through. They're going to do everything they can to stop it because they're thinking of their long-term benefit, right? And what would hurt their profits the most is if a terrorist came through and blew us up from Mexico, and then we would freak out and finally secure our border, right? They don't want that. But then as you go west and you get to the different cartels, you get to the Zetas cartel, and then most importantly, you get to the Gulf cartel. That's the one in the state of Tamaulipas. That's the one that's just south of the Rio Grande Valley sector. Okay? That's where all these miners are coming through. Now, here's what's going on there. The leadership has been decimated, arrested or killed. Now, those leaders oversaw managers who oversaw city bosses, who oversaw neighborhood bosses, right? So the leaders are gone, the managers are gone, and some of the city bosses are gone. So you no longer have a large cartel thinking of their long-term interests. Now you have a bunch of 15 to 22-year-old males with heavy weaponry, armored vehicles, that are, instead of resembling an Italian mob, they resemble gangbangers. The gangbangers we see with tattoos on their necks, right? They're not thinking about the long term of anything. That's where the danger is. That's the danger to us, right? The danger to us is that these groups they don't care about the long term. So if they can make money doing something in the short term, they're going to do it. They don't care about, they're not living for tomorrow, they're living for today. Now, the problem with them too is, I think with the Sinaloa, and there's obviously human smuggling that goes on and trafficking with the Sinaloa, but not to a large extent, because they realize that stuff like that galvanizes people against something, right? It galvanizes Americans to care about the border all of a sudden. We didn't get media to care about the border until we were able to show all the little kids' faces. And once we showed the little kids' faces, this is the first time I ever saw this happen, we put it up on Breitbart, Drudge picks it up, which happens like every day, so I'm not trying to brag. And then the next day, the Huffington Post made it my story like their lead story all day. They hate me. They hate me. But they did it anyways, But that's what I'm saying. So they're not going to do something that's going to affect them. But this Gulf cartel, the Zetas, and the way that it's structured, that's where the real danger is for, I think, sex trafficking victims. Let me tell you something you might not know, and it's on the same subject. So here's how this breaks down. When women and young girls leave Central America, okay, their mothers, how many of you know this? Their mothers put them on birth control or give them morning after pills. Did you know that? For the journey, because the expectation is that they're going to be raped multiple times. I'm not joking, it's 100% factual. So what they do is when they get across the river from Guatemala into Mexico, they're put in a stash house and they're usually raped there if they're attractive. They're raped, sexually assaulted. Now, from there, they're taken by another group from that stash house to Reynosa, Mexico, right, or Matamoros, but usually Reynosa. And they're raped there again, because that's a whole other group of people. Sometimes they're assaulted on the way. Then, when they finally make the trip across, when they stockpile them there on the border, and then they make a trip across, they're not raped in that little section. But then they go to another stash house, and usually, guess what happens to them there? They're raped or sexually assaulted or fondled there again. Then they're brought just south of Falfurrias to a border checkpoint, and they're led out, and they're led by a coyote. And guess what happens to them then? they're usually raped again. And that's why you see this phenomenon of rape trees in South Texas. And what that is you can tell a rape tree because when you go up to it, it'll have an article of female's clothing tightly secured to it. And it's this thing that these coyotes do, where that's like, somehow that's a trophy, or it makes them more of a man that they raped a girl under that tree, and they tie a piece of her clothing to it. So that's what we're dealing with, you know. We talk about, this is one of the things that bothers me, on the right we talk about security, and we have to talk about security. We talk about financial matters, economic matters. We talk about the system of entitlements we have and how we can't have an open border and have entitlements at the same time, right? Because it'll destroy us, it'll ruin our nation. And the biggest thing that we don't talk about is the humanitarian effects. Like, we don't talk about the human suffering and consequences that come from an open border, you know? None of us really talk about that. Occasionally some politician will throw it out there, but nobody really drills down. And that's really, I wish that that's how we led our narrative, really. Because the simple fact is that when that little boy was found a month and a half ago on the border, where they thought he was 5, but he was really 15 because he was malnourished. You know, his body looked like he was a little bitty boy. When they found his body out there and a coyote had left him to die, that guy wouldn't have died if we had had a secured border, you know? All of those women who get raped. And I'm gonna tell you what, I don't blame people for coming. A lot of people get mad at me for saying that. But if I lived in that hell, I wouldn't stay there either. I understand it. America's a wonderful place to live comparatively to the rest of the world. I get why they come, you know? I have no sympathy for the sex offenders and the narcotics traffickers and the murderers who come, but I have a profound amount of sympathy for people who come here to work. I understand that desire. If I had a little girl, if my little girl lived in that, I'd probably want to come too if you let me, you know? I'd probably come too. So I get it, and the humanitarian consequences to those people, when you tell people like, hey, and this is what our president is doing, and it's not just our president, this is what a lot of our state leaders have done. This is what if you're a Republican in the state of Texas and you need money for a nonprofit, you probably take money from some builders, I'm not gonna name them right now, and those builders probably only give you money if you like their candidates, you know? And you probably have to have a toned down. We saw it happen to a lot of groups in Houston where they're hardcore, they're Tea Party, they start getting some employees, they go through some suffering of funding, and next thing you know, they're getting money from certain builders, and the next thing you know, they're like all about amnesty, you know? That's how it happens, people. And, but there's something wrong with what our president's doing. He's basically saying, hey, kiddos, girls, come enter this journey where 90% of you are gonna get raped. Come on. You know, where 5% of you are gonna die. Come on. I think that is the most immoral, unhumanitarian thing I've ever seen from a US president in my lifetime. So yeah, next question. Yes, sir. Poor me, I know you're waiting for me. You're like, this guy's gonna shut up. I can't help him.
I think you answered
100 questions.
Almost all
In
of
my one
all
answer.
the questions I had. The only thing that I wanted to ask was about the other terrorists, ISIS and the ones from Gaza and Iraq. I feel like they're coming through that open border also. And I don't know how many open borders there are in the world, but I know about this one. But I do know only with all these children coming, what we have had here in Tyler is that when we have a Spanish-speaking child, they get entitlements and benefits on day one. They also get one-on-one in education for a teacher. They get, a teacher has one-on-one instead of 25 or 30 on one. And they also get college. That expense is coming strictly from the taxpayers. And I appreciate what you have said tonight, and I think Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. I think that was decided, it was, what year was it? Was it in '98, right? It was called George Bush versus the United States of America. I think that was the lawsuit. Where he tried to basically get reimbursement from the federal government for the expenses, including the expenses to our public school systems. And they said no. You know, Abbott's indicated that he may sue the federal government again over it. He thinks he has a change in circumstance, and I would say he does, you know. But I mean, it's a pickle. Like, what do you do? I mean, like, if you don't educate them and you ostracize them when you know they're going to stay anyways, like, A, you look like a monster, and B, they're going to hate you and hate everything you stand for. And liberty, yeah, that was real liberty to me. That's what they're going to say. So you're in a big pickle. But then if you let them stay, then you're going to encourage more to come and go through that grueling, hellacious, miserable hell that trip is, and what they go through. A lot of the little boys will make it here, but a lot of the little girls will get caught up into sex slavery. You know, if you're a very attractive woman coming from Central America, you're not going to make it into the U.S. to work. You're going to end up in the Bakken region or in West Texas in some brothel, getting beaten up and getting violated every day for money before they kill you or throw you away. That's just the reality. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to cost us. David Dewhurst came out and said $500 million or something. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. When it comes to terrorists, I don't know. I know that people from that region can come. I know they want to kill us, and I know that's the easiest way to come. And I know that people from those regions are coming. I can't say that ISIS came, and I don't think anyone else can say it either. I know that the Border Patrol has not caught anyone saying they're from ISIS, but they catch people who are Islamic from the Middle East coming illegally all the time. And let's be really clear here. There are a lot of people who come here illegally, and they turn themselves into the port of entry. And they said, hey, I'm here, I want to enter the U.S., I'm in danger, or I want to work. And usually those people get to stay. So it makes you wonder about the hundreds of people they catch in between the ports of entry who tried to sneak in, doesn't it? There's a report we released, and it was a little hyperbolic, my headline, but it was actually true. And I just said, leaked numbers reveal entire world exploiting our border, our porous border. And I released, for the first time in our history, I released the exact numbers of people who have come into the U.S. illegally from 75 nations from 2009 through like 2 months ago. And a lot of people came. You know, a lot of people came from Ebola nations, and I'm going to call them Ebola nations, sorry, that's offensive, but from nations that are suffering from Ebola or whatever you want to say. A lot of people came from those regions. That was concerning, you know, those kind of things. Next question. Before we wrap it up, we got maybe 2 or 3 more, and then I got to go.
Okay.
I got to let you go. That's what I'm holding you hostage.
I'm a new Texan. I
Welcome.
moved here from Florida.
Welcome.
Don't know a lot about Texas, but I have 2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
My first question has to do with the border issue and the illegal aliens and that. Do we know what is in Obama's bill that is before Congress now? Is there anything in that bill that would affect or help this situation?
That would affect our what situation? I'm sorry?
The situation, the border situation, what we're talking about.
I think it is I'm going to put it this way. I think it's very overtly and openly in Obama's best interest not to secure the border. And I think it's also very covertly not in his best interest to secure the border either, for what his political aspirations are. So I don't think that anything is going to come from him that's going to truly do anything for border security. He let us know what he thought about border security, calls for border security, when he went to El Paso. When was that? Within the last 2 years, right? Was it 2 years ago? He went to El Paso, completely offended the men and women of Border Patrol, and he mocked us. He mocked everybody calling for security. He said, look how secure it is. The border is secure. What do they want? They want a moat. Throwing an alligator in the moat, remember that?
Yeah, I saw some of that, but I also saw him, someone question him, and I know it was a reporter, but his response had to do with his bill that's being held up, that according to him would help the situation. I don't know what's in the bill, but and I'm not trying to guess either.
No, I'll tell you what the Democrats and what Obama is pushing is they're saying that in order to secure the border, we have to get immigration reform through. That's what he's saying. The bill will not go through because we already did it that way in 86 and 87, and it didn't work out so well because they never secured the border. And it wasn't just the Democrats, it was the Republicans too. And my proposition, and I think what most conservatives are saying, my proposition is that comprehensive border security reform needs to happen, and we can talk about immigration. The problem with Obama's bill is he knows that we're not going to push amnesty through. He knows that if he just changes a few details about amnesty that no one's going to put it through. And so he's able to pin it on Republicans and say, hey, they're not putting the border security through. And it's like, well, Mr. Obama's bill, I believe it had $300 million to be applied to border security, which is, I don't mean to be ugly, but that's not even enough for the Rio Grande Valley sector, much less the other 8 sectors of the border. So what he's basically doing is he's holding border security hostage until we say, yes, let's have 11 to 14 million more Democrats in the state, in the southern states, until we allow these people to stay and get full legal status and be fully legally entitled to health care and fully legally entitled to every entitlement that we have. And he's holding it hostage, is what I think. Now, he says that we're holding it hostage and that he can't give that token gesture to the border until we allow amnesty to go through, basically. Okay. Anybody agree with my interpretation of that?
Okay, I hear you and I understand what you're saying, but what good is it going to do him? I mean, unless he has other political aspirations after the presidency.
Well, I'm pretty sure, like most of us, I'm pretty sure Barack Obama feels like he's part of a movement. He's indicated that. I think with not only with his policy decisions, but the things he chooses to apply his words to and his time to. And I think that the Democratic Party is a lot bigger than Barack Obama. I think that it benefits the Democratic Party heavily that we either A, push amnesty, or B, that we do nothing and make the Republicans look like they're the ones who aren't doing anything, when in reality it isn't that at all, you know?
Okay, my second question has to do with being from Florida. We sort of went through similar situations with Cubans. However, I think it may have been a little easier for us because they had to come across the ocean, and they were usually caught before they made land. And I think one of the laws with us is if they ever put their foot on soil, they could stay. So that was always their goal, to get to land so that they could stay. Now, Florida's, it's still going on in Florida, not as much as it did originally, but the added thing is the Haitians coming in. So I worked in the school system, so I understand what you were talking about, having to teach children who don't speak your language. So it is a big, big problem, and it's not just in one part of the United States, it's in a lot of different parts of the United States. But I'm just wondering, is there anything that was done in Florida with their problem that could be done in Texas? Have you looked at, what was done there to have what they did with their problem that could work in Texas?
Well, I think it's a very different situation for a number of reasons. I'll tell you, the concept is called wet foot, dry foot. And obviously the amount of work it takes to get from Cuba into the U.S. is very different than what you saw in the video where that lady got on a jet ski and just stepped on the soil, you know? Obviously, it's easier to secure that. I think another issue is the numbers we're talking about. Like, let's put this in perspective. Come November, when we start to see, you know, tens of thousands of people, of unaccompanied minors coming again, which we will. In addition to that, you see tens of thousands of people who are called incomplete family units. We're starting to push, you know, starting to get into the 200,000 to 300,000 range in a year. So the Mariel boat lifts involved 142,000 people. So we've already passed that level, and this just started, you know. So you know, personally, like if 10 people showed up and needed help, I don't have a problem with that. But when you start talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, we have a problem. Not only because of our economic situation, our entitlements, you know, but also because culturally there's a problem. When people come from a place where it is culturally ingrained not to expect corruption and not to live under the rule of law, you know, not to understand the concept that there's a priori, you know, how to say this, not to understand the concept that there is a law and it has to be followed regardless of how we feel. Not to understand, because that translates into, I don't understand the concept that there's a constitution and it has to be followed no matter how we feel, you know? So you have not only a degradation of our assets and our resources for our own families, but then you have and for our own people who are in trouble, but you have a degradation of our entire political culture. You have a complete demographic shift politically, and these large numbers just make it impossible. So I don't really think the situation in Florida is, it's really not so applicable because of the fact that there's just you know, the Rio Grande River is in some places 70 yards, in some places it's less than 4 feet across. And you understand what I mean? It's just, and then the sheer numbers of people, like the number of Cubans versus the number of everyone south of our border. You know, you understand what I mean? It's a very different situation.
Yeah, I do understand. That's why I said they were easily caught because they got them in the ocean, which is much wider.
Easier to see, yeah.
It's the demographics that are different. But you ever been to Miami?
Yes, ma'am.
Been Havana?
Yeah. I like Cuban sandwiches though. But here's the deal, people. The deal is this, is we're gonna have to put more boots on the ground. It's really simple how you do it. You use the same technology we already have. In some areas you put a wall. Where Brian Terry was killed, you're gonna have to have 2 or 3 Border Patrol agents in every canyon. So you're looking at adding maybe 10,000 Border Patrol agents to Arizona to properly secure it. You know what I mean? That's a lot of people, but what are you gonna do? It is what it is, you know? If somebody said, well, hey, we have a Navy and we have 10 boats, and that's a lot of boats, and it's like, well, the ocean's pretty big, you know? Not enough boats for the whole ocean, right? Even though 10 boats is a lot of boats. Yes, sir.
I'd like to, first of all, address this young lady's question about what the president's bill contained, and that was an important question, and I looked into that some. It did not contain any money to pay for the National Guard troops that we need. And the reason that's relevant is because just a few years ago, Governor Perry, under his authority, sent National Guard troops to our border back in 07, 08, and he actually called up even more troops than he called up this time. But he did it in cooperation with then President Bush. And President Bush, the federal government reimbursed the state of Texas for the cost of those troops being sent to the Texas border. So we had hoped that when the president presented his bill to Congress that it would do like what had been done just not very long ago that we were going to get some reimbursement for those troops and the equipment and the helicopter fuel and the things that are required for that National Guard deployment. And in fact, there was no money for that. So that was disappointing. And Brandon, I've received the numbers from the Texas Military Department. The deployment that we're doing now is even much smaller in scale than what was done in Texas even just a few years ago. And I can show you the numbers that they gave me.
That was the narcotics task force, though. Right?
Well, it was Jumpstart and Wrangler. And I'm just showing you, it was a breakdown of what all they did and where all they went. And some of the Texas troops not only went to our border, but they went to other states, because it was not just Texas that was part of that. I want to make another point to kind of tell my fellow citizens here some of the struggles that we're facing as state representatives on this issue. In my conversations with fellow border reps, with folks, many of the Democrats, getting their perspective, talking to the Speaker's office, talking to different leadership offices, we're going to have an all-out fight this legislative session just to keep the limited measures in place that we've put in now. So all the stuff that I talked about when I gave my presentation about, hey, I think there's a reasonable case why we should operate on the Mexican side of the border at times, and especially in Tamaulipas, which is ungoverned. The Mexican government's not doing anything. So all these added troops that we need, that we could provide, the added helicopters that we need, that we could provide, all these things, that's luxury. We're going to have a political fight in Austin just to keep in place the limited measures that have been put in place right now. And so that's the difficulty. And you telling your story is so important, because guys like me, they stop telling me stuff too, because they know what Schaefer's saying in Tyler, Texas, and they don't want me to know those things. So I've been down to the border, and I've spent time with non-border patrol people and the Vickers Ranch and in other places. But the point also that you made about Tamaulipas, it is ungoverned. So I've heard even some Democrat state reps say, well, we need to get the president to get down there, and this is a diplomacy issue. He needs to work with the Mexican government to do this and that. The Mexican army cannot even effectively operate in that state. And I've talked to my friends in the Homeland Security Department that once our federal agents begin to work with agents in the Mexican Army or the Mexican Marines, they can trust them, or they can vet them for 2 or 3 months. And then if they get to that third month, they've been operating against the cartels, they lose faith in the Mexican officials, because now the cartels will say, here's the new guy. We got to go visit his family and whisper in his ear as to what's going to happen to him if he continues to put pressure on our business. The cartels only understand 2 things: force and money. That's what they care about. And to tell you, the Bible talks about breaking the teeth of your enemies. Until you break their teeth, they're not going to pay attention to it. They don't have any political concerns. They don't worry about getting votes or constituencies like we do over here. They don't care about jurisdictional lines. And so until our security forces in the state of Texas and the United States begin to speak the same language as the cartels, language of force, languages of hurting their finances in a very real and meaningful way, that's how we fight wars overseas. When we go to Afghanistan, we look at the money and we look at the force. That's what we go after. And we're ignoring that on our border in favor of political considerations. And you're right. There are people along the border, probably for their own safety reasons, they don't want you to build a fence. They don't want to be the one guy in town that says, stop all this, because their families will get hurt.
They'll get hurt. I'm glad you brought this up, and I hope we can keep dialoguing right now for a second. We're having problems on the U.S. side with public corruption. How many of them remember Abbott coming out and talking about how corrupt it was in the Valley, and everyone got mad at him, and all the Democrats got mad at him? We went into okay, let me tell you. So we started just hammering out public corruption stories every day from the border, and then finally the Democrats quit saying that because we busted their bottom ends, to put it nicely. But we're having problems with law enforcement, and not our state troopers, but we are having problems with law enforcement officers in the U.S. with corruption as well. We had an officer, an HPD officer, or was a Harris County constable, who last year was caught giving protection and advice for a large cocaine shipment from Mexico. We had Sheriff Lupe Trevino in the Panama unit down in the valley in Hidalgo County, McAllen, you know about this?
How many of the sheriffs in Starr County have been indicted?
But it goes on and on and on, and so I can always tell when I go somewhere because of my experiences, law enforcement tends to be very nice to me, you know, and friendly with me as a journalist when they're not always with other journalists. And there's a couple of border towns where I've gone into and they've made me feel so unwelcome and unsafe. And I was like, okay, something's wrong in this town. Something's really wrong here. Like if they don't want me there, something's wrong. And we have massive problems on our side, massive problems on their side. And you're absolutely right. Like hitting their money really matters. But the simple fact of the matter is there's not the political will in this current administration. And the problem with the state stepping up big time is that I really believe that this DOJ will find a way to prosecute. Look what they did to Sheriff Arpaio, whether you like Arpaio or not. I mean, the federal government basically came in and they didn't take him away, but everything he does, he has to go through a nanny that's a federal appointed nanny now. Every decision he makes has to get, that's insane. So we're going to get prosecuted. We'll end up prosecuted for trying to secure our own border. But another thing about the state, and I'm not critiquing the DPS agents by any means, and I actually like McGraw. I don't want to be ugly to him. But there's something really weird about, and this is something I didn't bring up, but when you leave the Rio Grande Valley sector and you go to Laredo, you have a roughly 70-mile trip. And I did that trip, and I didn't see any border patrol, any state troopers, any sheriff's deputies. There was no law enforcement for 70 miles. And then the next time I was telling them about it, and then when we drove back this way, we went for 56 miles along the U.S.-Mexico border without seeing any law enforcement, any aerostats, nothing. But then when you got into Zapata, it was just full of state troopers. And it's the way that, it's not the state troopers' fault. I mean, these guys are being taken away from their families and having to go live in hotels down, I get it. But there's something really wrong with that picture. And it's also that whole concept about the way we assign resources. When I leave Lubbock and I drive to Sweetwater, it's roughly, 123 miles? I see 5 state troopers. When I drive a little bit less than that, but an approximate distance, a resembling distance along the border, I don't see any state troopers, And I'm not insulting the state troopers, but there's something wrong with the assignment of resources. And I know that it takes time because those guys live in that area. But, we've had a pretty long run of a Republican governor, And it can't take that long. You know what I mean? It can't take that long. So, what has it been, 12 years? I'm not trying to be ugly, but I'm just saying. I like Rick Perry. I think he's a nice guy, but I'm just saying, I like his glasses, too. I think they're cool. And I noticed he took them off for that press conference about the charges. He's like, he went from intellectual to tough again, really, like that. So it's good that he can be both. But you get what I'm saying. We have some massive problems in the state. Obviously, I think that if we get too funky about our border, we're going to end up prosecuted by people are going to get prosecuted by the DOJ, or sued by the DOJ, like Arpaio did. But I hope that this organizing and this talking to people, I hope that it's beneficial to our state government as well.
Well, Brandon, I do think we need to look at Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution and the imminent danger clause. And I think we're going to have to change the conversation. And if that means testing it all the way up to the Supreme Court, we should do it. The FAA ban on us using our aerial vehicles along the border, we ought to ignore that and let them sue us.
That's right.
And take it up to the Supreme Court and just say, hey, just call them out. And at some point look at the state's inherent police powers as it's referred to in the constitutional lingo. States have the inherent police power to keep their citizens safe, and we're not doing that. And I do think that I think the border is more than about security, more than about immigration. It is ultimately about the rule of law. And are we going to be a nation of laws, or are we going to be a nation of men? And right now, when it comes to the border, we are a nation of men. We're not a nation of laws.
Absolutely. And that's what distinguishes us. Okay, guys, on that note, let's do
One
one more question.
This man very graciously gave the
Very,
microphone to Matt.
very patient.
Is this working? Yes.
I like Matt, by the way. Did I mention that? I like you.
You are preaching to the choir, of course, tonight.
Well,
Although
yeah.
we're learning a huge much more than what we knew before. Now, in life, we run into people every day. We hire them, we fire them, we work with them. I have come up with 7 categories that I call the IQ of our politicians, the people in positions of authority at all forms of government. It's called the integrity quotient. Number 1 is lazy. Number 2, is this right? Okay. Number 2 is incompetent. Number 3 is habitual liars. Number 4, support open borders blatantly with no national boundaries. Are crony capitalists looking for cheap labor? That's number 5. Number 6, want a demographic shift, you mentioned this, to a social welfare state. And number 7, abolish the free enterprise system in favor of Marxism. And what I get so disgusted on watching TV and YouTubes and everything else is the press, not you, but the press in general never presses these people that we are going to hire or that we should fire on where they fit into this IQ category.
Of course they don't. Of course they don't. I think that's awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. Here's the deal. The press agrees with them. You guys, let's be realistic here, okay? We're conservatives. We believe in especially as Texans, we believe that we have the right to defend ourselves. They don't believe we have the right to defend ourselves. They want us to be more like England, where we are dependent upon government to help us. And they make it very clear. They make it very clear when someone gets shot and they show up in force and run them through the ringer. Like, they make it very, very clear that you're not supposed to defend yourself. Now, most of those situations aren't so clear cut. I mean, there's obviously plenty of room to look at, have different perspectives on that. But the bottom line is like, they don't want us defending ourselves. They don't want us defending our own property. That's not our job, that's their job. They don't want us defending our border. That's not our job, that's their job. They don't want us to, go down the line. And so the media isn't going to press those people because the media agrees with them. This is their guy. That far left media we have, this is their guy. He's also, though, he gets kind of cronyistic, just like Bush. I'm sure a lot of people here love Bush, I guess, but he had some cronyism issues. Perry has some cronyism. We have some cronyism in our government, right? We know that. We know that we do in the Republican Party, too. It isn't, hey, man, the biggest pushback I get from people isn't from Democrats. It's from Republicans who call me racist or a nativist, which if anyone knows me, that's the last thing that's fair to say, considering my body of work in my life. But that's what I get called. So it's how it is. Like, this is their guy. This is their chance to make radical changes, and they're doing some long-term damage to us and to our republic, I think. But I agree with you, and I think that's awesome that you put that together. Okay, guys, on that note, I'm going to thank you for having me. I'm going to run, and I'm going to eat food. But I want to thank you for having me. What I'm going to do is, real quick, I think I have a mommy. Let me see. Yeah, here. I'm going to walk up. Is this going to work if I walk around? Yeah, I think so. That'd be cool. Here, y'all. Here. Pass these around. Okay. These are my cards. Now, I'm going to ask you a favor. try not to call me. Try to reserve that, because some people, I get my cards out and they pass them back, and what they do is they call me like every day or 2 times a day with like story ideas, and I say, don't do that, please. Like, but if you absolutely have to, you know something wrong, or you know somebody who's in trouble or who's being treated unfairly by media or by law enforcement, or by law enforcement isn't taking up their case, or anything rotten you know about, any corruption you know about, please don't call me and say, our president's corrupt. So I know our president's corrupt. But you get what I'm saying. You have my card. We have an immense ability at Breitbart because of AR resources, which we have because people click on our website, and then because of friends that we have, like JoAnn and people like you. We have a pretty good ability to get things done, whether it's to hold people accountable or whether it's to help individuals. So you can give me a call if you absolutely have to. I prefer email. I'm just going to tell you that. I'd really prefer you call JoAnn and she called me. Yeah, but that's all, guys. Thanks for having me.
Couple things. We have been aggregating some of the top Breitbart stories, and we'll send out like JoAnn's top stories you need to read today. And we've been doing that so that you just click on that link and it takes you to Breitbart, Texas. So we've been trying to do that, but I will tell you, you need to go to Breitbart, Texas every single day. Breitbart, Texas is the first place. Yeah, several times a day. I go, that's when I first start out in the morning to look at the news, because I need to stay up with the news every single day in case I get a call from the media, which I do a lot. And I did a Pennsylvania drive time radio program the other day for the first time. So, woohoo, Texas conservative women talk in Pennsylvania. But anyway, so just be sure that you go there, because there's breaking news on Breitbart, Texas all the time. Now, we will have Brandon back tomorrow. I invite you all to come back tomorrow, because Brandon is like me, is an extemporaneous speaker, and so you never get the same thing twice. And so I would encourage you to come back. Now, the last thing I want to tell you is that last weekend, I was part of a group of Tea Party grassroots conservative leaders from around the state that met in Webster. And prior to that, I had spent hours and hours. It's one of those days that I work till 4:30 in the morning, and then I take a nap, and then I get up about 7 o'clock and I go again. Anyway, we have completed the first draft of the Texas Border Crisis Solution. And what we've done, I hope to get the edits from the people that were there by tomorrow. And so then we're going to have a final that we send out to all the Tea Parties that weren't there. But you guys will be getting a copy of it. So I'll tell you what we've done. What we've done is we've gone through and we've given a background with a lot of statistics that we got from Breitbart, Texas, and from the border agents. We've gone through and we've laid the foundation. Because if you're just an idiot and you've been living under a rock and you don't know we have a problem, we wanted to make sure that some of our least illuminated state reps and senators would be able to read this and say, this is what they're talking about. So we've laid the groundwork as to why it is absolutely wrong for us to have an open border. Then we've come along with solutions. And the solutions are supported by Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, and the idea of interposition. I will tell you that I got enormous support from Heritage Action. Somehow they got their hands on our report and have already read it, and they said they thought it was fantastic and had one suggestion on interposition to add in there. And so Wade Miller from Dallas is working on that to add in here. But I will tell you that I'm planning, if Ashton doesn't have something else scheduled for, I think, the first Friday in September, September the 5th, I'm planning on doing a presentation to grassroots about what our plan is so that you all understand, because frankly, we're going to start agitating for this in every possible way, because what it means is it's an end to Texas participation in the federal catch and release program. Because, you know, that's what we're doing right now. And this is you all know that I really support Border Patrol and DPS, all of our rangers and game wardens, law enforcement, I do. But they have not been given the right orders. We've got to stop participating in catch and release. That means not 1 foot on the border. As I've said, around the state, there are 29 legal ports of entry in the state of Texas. We have more legal ports of entry than any other state. People need to be encouraged to use those. And let's stop coming over on inner tubes and jet skis and everything else. And frankly, the only way that you're going to be able to stop that is if you have the kind of force on the border that they've been given the right orders that they can repel that.